what we're trying to do is to create sort of a trusted entry point for Chinese companies coming to the U.S. in general. Obviously, we have a particular focus on this region, but we do suggest to Chinese companies that wherever you want to go in the U.S., it's a good place to start here. I think there's a long time strong relationship between Washington, D.C. and China. In fact, the longest sister city relationship is between Washington, D.C. and Beijing, which started shortly after the opening of China, or when President Nixon visited. So there's been a lot. There's been that connection over many years. What we tried to do with the Greater Washington China Investment Center is draw from, or at least what I try to do, is draw from the experience I had at Fleishman Hillard, working on behalf of Chinese companies, and take that knowledge and bring it down a notch to the next wave of Chinese investment, which is the smaller companies that have had great success in China and are looking to go global with the encouragement of the Chinese government. I like to say that if there's one thing that the U.S. and China agree on, it's that Chinese companies should invest in the U.S. The last two 5-year plans encouraged it, and the U.S. has established an agency called Select USA with a global focus, but clearly the priority is China in terms of encouraging inbound investment. And so what I tried to do with the GWCIC is to create a trusted gateway for Chinese companies. And the elements of that I would hope encourage trust is the fact that it's a public-private partnership. It's actually funded, at least in part, by a grant from the D.C. government. We're also working closely with Maryland and Virginia. And so having that government connection, that public-private element, we think is something that will engender trust from potential members coming from China. The other thing is that we make it regional, and because I think anybody who knows anything about China, if Washington, D.C. all by itself goes to China and tries to promote itself, the fact that there are 700,000 people in China, and the fact that, in Washington, D.C., and the fact that it's growing, but by 1,500 people a month, is not very impressive to most Chinese jurisdictions. So we think that broadening the promotional activities to encompass Maryland and Virginia brings the scale to the effort, and also brings a lot of assets that these other jurisdictions combined can bring together. You have in Montgomery County, Maryland, you have a huge healthcare center with the Food and Drug Administration and the National Institutes of Health. That's a big advantage there. In Prince George's County, it's a sort of a lower income area, and property values are lower, so there's an appeal there in terms of Chinese investments. If you go to Virginia, you have a lot of high-tech opportunities there. And in Washington, you have a state office for every state in America. You have the headquarters of most trade associations. You even could use it as a gateway to go elsewhere in the world, to the degree that there are embassies from every country in the world. And the U.S. has many free trade agreements that when a Chinese company locates in the U.S., they then can tap into the free trade agreements that the U.S. maintains in other countries around the world. So to kind of sum it up, my objective with the Greater Washington China Investment Center is to create an entity that Chinese companies can trust, and then create the services. Of course, we have a network of service providers who are committed to China and recognize that there are challenges and are willing to confront those challenges in dealing with Chinese companies, bringing that all together to make it an easier than it would otherwise be entry into the U.S. market. As I mentioned previously, there is this issue of trust that has to be overcome, and I think that to the degree that we can put together a program that will communicate to potential Chinese investors that there are many organizations, firms, companies who are genuinely trustworthy and genuinely want to help Chinese succeed, Chinese companies succeed, and participate in that success. That often requires participating in a certain amount of risk as well. So what I, in fact, work that I have tried to build with the GWCIC is a network of companies and agencies that are willing to invest some effort, that are not, I mean, a lot of, I guess let me back up a bit. I mean, there is a sense sometimes for people that have not spent a lot of time working on the cross-border investment issue with China, that they think there is this pot of gold there that they're going to find if they can just tap into it. There's such a vast amount of money that is moving that they can get rich quick, I guess, to put it very bluntly. And in my experience, nobody's going to get rich quick because everybody's fairly cautious on this. So when I look for partners for my organization, companies that are willing to forego short-term profit, short-term success, to build relationships over the long term. So to get right to the question, in terms of any meeting or any kind of gathering that you bring together, it's important to distinguish between those two types of potential helpers or supporters of Chinese investment, and separate out those who think there is a lot of money to be made quickly to those who are willing to invest the effort in the relationships and take on some of the risk at the front end in order to maybe bear some reward in the back end. And frankly, there has to be some movement on the Chinese side as well. I think that the business norms are different in China, and that we have to meet in the middle. And that's where I see these meetings having the most value, is getting both sides to kind of understand the other side, understand what their motives are. But again, it has to start from a point of mutual benefit, the famous win-win situation, and not kind of a short-term bonus, which I think a lot of this, and I think that's why Chinese companies do tend to be cautious and aren't sure who to trust, because there are a lot of potential downsides to partnering with the wrong person. So that's what I, just in terms of framing that meeting in July, if we can bring together people on both sides of the transaction who are in it for the right reasons and want to share both in the risk and in the benefit. The short answer is yes. One of the Chinese interests that we've been working with is a real estate investor from China who has come to the area, and as I mentioned earlier in my remarks, Prince George's County actually provides really good opportunities for Chinese investors because the property values are relatively low. Other areas around the Washington area, they're extremely high, among the highest in the country. Prince George's has both the proximity to Washington and all that offers, but also has a relatively inexpensive property opportunities. This investor actually bought a Bible college, a fully operational campus in Lanham, Maryland, for a very low price. And the reason he was able to do it is because the Baptist church that was selling the property had been in long-term negotiations with some other buyer, and this Chinese investor came in through his American intermediary and said, if you want to sell this, I will give you the less money, but I'll settle in 1 month. And he got the property for less money, and he settled, and everyone was very happy with that. And there is, I think, a broader community in the Washington area that sees the benefits of Chinese inbound investment. Some of it is direct investment like that. I know Ralph mentioned the EB-5 program. That is a huge contributor to the current a building boom in the Washington area. In fact, $200 million have come in through the EB5 program. So I don't know if I've answered the specific question in terms of angel investors in specific. I will just say there's a lot of interest in Chinese investment in real estate in this region, and all the resources needed to succeed in that area are here.